2, 3, test.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
I will try to play it. Now, sure, it's going here.
But I was going to contact, do you know if, the residents were ever able to get those questions?
Well, they're working on it.
Oh, okay. So we didn't do it for this
They had,
year?
right, exactly. So they had, well, we had the same questions we used last year.
Right.
So it wasn't. He's having trouble getting the drop down of work and all.
Supposedly the Democrats' position,
So yeah.
they're going to be running a couple of
Yeah, we will. Oh, okay.
Although we open, he told me last week.
Yeah.
Wednesday of this week. Yeah. We actually opened.
Oh, okay.
But we don't.
Yeah. Maybe it would,
It's a good time to check.
yeah, just kind of highlight it. See how it goes. Yeah.
we can all go on an extended,
So, yeah,
we go
we're
on
moving.
extended vacation without pay.
Finish
Where we
anything.
needed to be.
Yeah, and we're after Mercy. I think.
Yeah, yes.
Hi, Ginger.
Exactly. But I'll forget it.
Okay, good. Well,
And I'll
as soon
probably.
as we make some progress, I
I'll have it,
appreciate it.
I'll definitely run it by you. Give it to you, sure.
Students started.
Sure. Oh, no
Yeah.
problem.
Long time no see. How have you been?
Jim Lewis did. Hello, hello. How you doing? I'm good, good. Well, that's nice to hear. Sure, yeah.
Good, how are you?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Hey,
I was just going to say,
how are you?
I didn't get to talk to your sons too much when they were here for Engineers Day. I was talking to you about other things, but I wanted to talk to them about some. Brad, I didn't tell you, we'll let you go here, but we just got an invitation to do a video for the ASW Nation. That'll pretty good thing.
You're good seeing you. Running, we're gonna run that 10K like 2 weeks. So maybe I'll read them. Hey.
I don't think it is. Hey, where did he speak?
Like grade wise? I think what really what it's gonna honestly come read and I was very
I would expect you guys opportunity. I think it resonated.
I'm kind of torn because that could really be the difference between.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Hall. I'm Vice President for Community Engagement, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this open campus forum with our candidate for Executive Vice President and University Provost. We will be here until 1 o'clock. I'll introduce our candidate. Then he will give opening remarks, but we want this to be an interactive session. So we will have this mic that will be available that will go around the room to allow you to pose any questions you have of our candidate. There's plenty of pizza here, so please feel free to help yourself. Let me just, many of you know him and his vita is on our website, but let me give you a brief a summary of his professional accomplishments. Our candidate received his undergraduate degree in chemical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology in New Delhi. He received both of his master's and doctorate degree from Penn State University in chemical engineering. The University of Louisville recruited him from the University of Cincinnati, where he worked up through the ranks as professor of chemical engineering. He was the department chair of chemical engineering at the University of Cincinnati. He became the assistant dean for graduate studies in the College of Engineering, and then he became vice provost and dean of the graduate school at the University of Cincinnati. Since being here at the University of Louisville, Dr. Pinto has served, as you know, 4 years as dean of our Speed School, JB Speed School of Engineering. And since May of last year, he has served in the interim capacity as the executive vice president and university provost. So without further ado, let me call to the microphone Dr. Neville Pinto.
Thank you, Dan, and good afternoon, folks. And can you hear me okay? And thank you for coming this afternoon. Maybe if I move this a little lower. Really appreciate this opportunity to interview for this position, and he's working hard there to get it. Let me move it a little bit lower. to use the other mic? Oh, there we go. It's working. All right. Thank you. Once again, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Dan was kind enough to introduce you with my formal resume, but what I'd like to do is just start off with a few remarks about who I am, what probably doesn't show up on the resume, and how I really got to this point where I'm being considered for this very, very key position at the University of Louisville. So as you probably noted from his remarks, I have my bachelor's degree a long way from here. I was actually born in Bombay, India, which is about as different from Louisville, Kentucky, as you can imagine. And I often wonder, what is the path and what were the sort of advantages and factors that got me to this point? And I'll tell you it started, and I won't make this a long story, but it's relevant to the point I want to make. It's really a commitment that my parents had in all of us, and in education as the great enabler. And I didn't recognize that at that point. I was born into very fortunate circumstances in a very poor country, but they invested heavily in our education. And that really gave me an advantage over others that, again, I didn't appreciate at that age. It prepared me for my future academic career because I had a very strong foundation. And it also made me extremely competitive because I was well prepared to be competitive. And I didn't really, as I said, I didn't really appreciate that until I was really quite a few years into my career at the University of Cincinnati. When I went to Penn State, quite honestly, I didn't even know. First of all, I didn't even know where Pennsylvania was before I got there. I didn't know that I was going to be in the middle of this sort of farmland in the middle of nowhere. But it was really, and I didn't know it was a public university. I didn't know where the dollars were coming from to pay for my education because I was on a scholarship. But I appreciated that all later on when I became a professor at the University of Cincinnati. I went to the University of Cincinnati because my experiences as a teaching assistant at Penn State really started to get me interested in teaching. I had some really good experiences where I actually taught for weeks on end lectures in classes. And my original plan, at least my family's plan, was to have me educated here and come back and work with my dad on some of his businesses. That didn't quite turn out because I really started to love what I was doing here in academia, and particularly the interest I started to develop in research and as a graduate student. So when I moved over to the University of Cincinnati, I went there with many of you who are faculty here. Probably your interest was probably similar to mine in teaching and research. But where my actual evolution occurred was once I understood what my true job was. Once I met the students at the university and understood, and this circles back to why I described my path, that their path was very different from mine. I got to where I was because I was fortunate where I was born and the commitment that my family had. Many of them didn't have that opportunity. The University of Cincinnati is almost identical in its mission to the University of Louisville. There they call it an urban research university. It has exactly the same mission as we have here. And what's at the core and heart of that university is its commitment to the citizens of the region, and that's the same commitment we have here. It's about providing access and providing equal opportunity to all who are willing to put in the effort and to all who want to make their lives better by exposing them to what is the highest level of education that you can have, one at a research university. And that's what's driven me throughout my career once I realized that aspect of my job and how important it was. So here I speak to why we exist as a university, not what we do, but why we do it. And I think that changes the focus of work. It changes the focus of your decisions. And that's when I refer to this, and some of you have stated this, is students are at the center of our decisions. And that's how I approach my responsibilities. Much of what I have done in what Dan described earlier has been, for the first 21 years of my career, was as a faculty member. I was really only a part-time administrator in most positions. And what I meant by that, I was mentally part-time because mostly I was focused as a faculty member. I only made the complete transition when I moved to the provost office there as dean of the graduate school, because that was a full-time job and more. And that exposed me really to upper administration at a university, and my interest in becoming a dean of engineering really evolved from the committee of the provost, which was composed of the provost and 3 vice provosts at that level, one for strategy and academic programs, the other for graduate programs, that was me, and then there was a person on the business side. And so I was exposed to a lot of the work that went on with the deans of the various colleges, and from that I learned a whole lot. I saw why certain colleges were more successful than others, and I learned a lot of good practices in leadership. And from that, I decided, and at that time, for those of you here from the Speed School recognize that for some years we had challenges in attracting good students and enough students to engineering. There was sort of a myth out there that engineering was very difficult and really you didn't really succeed, and it was much better to go into other professions. And so we collectively, as an academic profession, had worked across the country to change that story. And there was a need and an opportunity for leadership in that area, and when that opened up here at the Louisville, I thought that would be a great opportunity to impact my own field with all the experiences that I had at the University of Louisville. And that's how I ended up here. So I continue to have that passion. This is a tremendous university. I've learned a lot about it in these last 4 years, truly come to appreciate its strengths. Certainly its students are the center of its strengths, but its faculty and staff are equally important. And I've seen that commitment at both ends, and I've seen the commitment and values as an institution, and that's what really excites me in the work that I do. So I don't know if you wanted me to talk about more about what. I think I've been in this interim role for about a year, so you've seen how I operate and what I've done, I hope, if you've been paying attention. And so I could expand on any of that, through questions, but I think we want to leave a lot of time. The intent of the search committee was to leave a lot of time for questions. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions.
If you have a question, I'll bring the mic to you so everyone can hear the question.
Hi, Dr. Pinto. You mentioned, thank you again for coming to the Staff Senate Committee meeting, or Staff Senate meeting this week. And in that meeting, you mentioned, I was very intrigued that you mentioned hiring someone to help with student retention, a position to help with. And so I'm wondering what other strategies you would like to employ aside from that. What are some strategies you hope to help with student retention?
All right, that's a great question to follow up. So just to give you context on that, within our University of the 21st Century, one of our main themes or initiatives is in the student success area. And I think that's incredibly vital for our institution. It's vital for the reason that we want our students to be successful. That's fundamentally our ethical responsibility. But it's also important to us as sort of permanent faculty and staff at the university because it's going to enhance our reputation. The more successful, universities, we have a beautiful campus here, we have beautiful buildings, we have strong faculty, strong staff, and all that. It's great. But ultimately, reputations of universities are built on its graduates. And that's ultimately what counts. So if we have successful graduates and we have high-quality individuals who are attracted and then educated here, we're going to do well. So going back to the question there, what I had mentioned was that one of the pieces that I think we need to work around here is the Student Success Initiative and focus a lot of resources. Actually, it was in the context of the budget cuts, if I remember correctly. And I was giving examples of where we have to be strategic in our investments. So we cannot lose our focus through sort of day-to-day pressures. When we're moving through a university, we always have to keep our vision in mind and drive toward that vision, recognizing that the resource sources, the amount of the resource, the origins of the resource and the amount that we have may change with time, but we have to focus on moving the institution forward. And so one of our goals in the University of the 21st Century is student success. So the idea was that, do we have the structure here to be successful? And I think the comment I made, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think was around the acts of, I think it would be a very good idea for us to invest in building out this whole structure around enrollment management and student success. And we need to have the right leaders in that place. So that was one thing that I talked about, have the right leadership to move that forward. But to answer your question specifically, other things that are going on. Related to that, we have to understand that student engagement is important in every aspect on campus. So it's within the classroom, much of the impact is within the classroom. And so within that context, when we're thinking about faculty, we have to have a strong commitment to the success of our students through teaching, curriculum, all of the aspects that make strong education. Updating those as necessary through good practice and research. And we need to build the accompanying structures that help faculty do that. So one of the things, for example, that we're doing is when we were thinking about this new building, as we gathered together and thought about the opportunity that the state had allocated us after many, 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 many years, $80 million for a new building, could be impacted the most? And so the decision was made through that process that, wow, wouldn't this student success initiative be what could be empowered with this new and tremendous space? Recognizing that students interact differently with universities now in the way they learn, they need more open spaces, faculty need better classrooms, we need to make that a center for support of students outside of the classroom through a student success center that integrates career advice, advising, and academic advice as well, or academic support as well. And so all of that would be integrated in there. So that whole piece about the facilities that we build out, the facilities that we renovate is extremely important. So even when we're doing the SAC renovation, there are discussions around student spaces and where students can learn outside of the classroom, where they can gather, where they work on group projects and things of that sort. The other aspect is sort of the digitization of our whole world. And that has certain advantages and the challenges and opportunities. And so we have to be upfront, and I won't go into the details, but in every aspect of our lives now, we can be advantaged by technology. And so how do we think through technology? Usually when we think about technology and education, we think about the classroom, but there's so many other aspects. The fact that analytics can now be used to predict student success in a fairly accurate way is something that we have to leverage. So we are actually partnering with this company, Education Advisory Board, and the project has started. It started in the fall. We started it in the fall. We launched actually the campus phase of it in February, and we have to continue to invest in that so that allows us to have the ability to help our students connect to the resources that are here. And so an example of those resources is advising. We've also launched an advisement plan, and we have to think about how we can strengthen advising around student success. So there's a whole lot of pieces that we're putting together. I haven't actually been comprehensive, but I don't want to spend all my time on this, but I hope this helps you understand some of the things that we're doing in that regard. Any other questions? I think there's one there, and we'll come here, I guess.
Heidi Pinto.
Hello.
I was curious as to what your thoughts are on the new centralized business center. I know when you first came, you were instrumental in getting the business center into the Speed School, and it's quite possible that in future years that business center will be gone and everything will be moved into the new central business center.
Great question. And so again, to put that in context, what she's talking about is a central business office that we established within the Speed School. So where we started there was we have, I've already forgotten, we have 8 departments. I got it right. I have a bad memory, don't I? Yes, 8 departments. We have 8 departments, and we had all our business services distributed across these departments. My assessment through a planning process, we went through a pretty rigorous planning process that started from the departments up. Departments developed plans, and then we developed a plan for the school itself. But through that process, I learned a whole lot. And just remember, I was new to the university at that time, so I was very much in the learning mode as well. And one of a few things came through. One actually relates to my previous comments. One was that advising was not where it should be at the Speed School at that time. So we had to deal with that issue. The other was that the business services, mostly from the users of these business services, was that the business services could be improved as well. And so when we looked at, so we put together a task force. In February of my first year, I put together a task force to study whether that was really a substantial issue, and they concluded it was. And we have some unusual pieces at the Speed School. One was that we supported our own research operation there. You know this, but I'm saying it for the rest of the group. But we had to support our own research operation. It was supported on overhead return, and so there's some quirks there. But what we decided after careful study was that really what we needed to do was change that environment, professionalize it, help the folks who are working in that unit have the right tools and training to respond to the needs of those jobs, provide them a ladder that they aspire to climb within their profession. So all that was structured with those objectives in mind. The goal there really was to improve services, to improve the quality of services, the reliability of services, because typically what was happening in these departments, there was one person doing almost all of those. So, you can imagine there's always sort of problems with that, and that's really because there was not enough budget to hire more people. There's progressive budget cuts, that's where it got to. So they were expected to do a lot of things. They did a few of these things maybe once a year. They couldn't remember the processes. It wasn't as efficient. They didn't have the right tools to do it, the software tools and the hardware tools. So we had to change all of that. And so that was done carefully with the idea of bringing all that together, putting all the resources together, but ensuring that the services at all times were either equal to or superior to what has been done earlier. Now going back to the university, that's on a different scale. From my experience, I think it's been very good. I mean, you are aware of it, you have your own opinion, but others of you not in the Speed School may want to talk to those folks. I think generally it's been appreciated that that's done that way now. It's improved the level of service for everybody. I know that the staff who work there actually like the environment better because they have people, like-minded people around them, and as I said, there's now a structure by which they can advance and so on, not only within the Speed School, but within the university as well. So with respect to the university as a whole, there's a reality as well. There's a reality that we are in a mode where the public is defunding higher education, okay? And the amount of money that we have available to support our functions is going to decrease, and we have to get more efficient. We have to get more efficient, but that's also an opportunity to improve the quality of the services, okay? But that should not be the reason for doing this, because whenever you make these decisions, to me, there is a higher imperative or a more important imperative, and that is to ensure that the core mission of the university, going to go back to what I said, what is it we do and why do we do this, is not affected. And so in thinking through this, we have to think about how we support all of our departments through these business services. And when we look around, it's always a good example to see what our sister institutions are doing. When we look around that, we have good examples of how people have managed that. And we have to look to all of those situations and try to adapt it to our environment and determine what is the best outcome. But I'll say my style, and some of you already know this, is it's important and it's a responsibility of leadership to make the right decisions after careful thought and consideration, not the easy decisions. Okay, so in this case, that has been studied. We've looked at it very carefully, and it seems like it's a good option for us to pursue. I think decisions haven't been made. I think there's a phased approach to this, and I'm not exactly sure how all that's going to play out. It's a much more complex situation than what I did at the Speed School. Speed School is fairly homogeneous. All the departments are engineering, though the one is different from the other, but it's relatively homogeneous. This is a much more heterogeneous environment. Yes?
Because I am one of the members of the Speed
I know, I do know that.
So I'm curious as to how that's going to affect
I
us
see.
later going forward.
I don't have the answer to that. I don't think we've got down to that level of detail because decisions haven't been made at that level of detail. But I think there will be certainly a recognition on my part that you don't want to mess with something that's already running extremely well. I hope. It was when I when I left. And so I see where your question's coming from. I didn't connect the two. Yeah, but we haven't got down to that level yet. It's too far down the road for us. So we're really dealing with the bigger concept, and it seems, to me, it's the way to go. It's the right way to consider. It facilitates the work considerably because of the nature of the specialties that are in there and the resources you can put in providing the platforms across the system. There was a question here.
We've been talking about student success, and I don't think I need a microphone. We've been talking about student success just recently. I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences. I don't know that you really knew that about me. I know Dr. Goes.
I do, actually, yeah.
One of the things we talk about in arts and sciences is the fact that we get all the students that don't get where they want to go. And specifically, the students from the School of Business, the students from engineering, the students from nursing, students that don't meet the criteria to get accepted into the program that they truly want to pursue. I'd just like to hear your thoughts about that going forward.
That's a huge challenge for us.
So when we think about that, I mean, if you think about sort of the pressures at every end, on the one hand, it's not that they haven't been admitted to those colleges because those colleges just, don't want them. It's based on sort of reason and experience and the fact that they're not academically prepared for those programs in one way or another. However, those students are still, we understand that they're of value to society. They're of big value to society as future leaders and citizens. And so they would benefit from an education at a university like ours. The challenge is, and this is really part of growing up and young people focusing, the challenge is really to focus them on things that would be of interest to them and explain the reality in a way that doesn't disengage them from learning. And so that is a major focus for us as we go forward. We have to do better on those numbers. In fact, this last year, and I can't be certain of this, and I won't put Dale on the spot, but we lost, he knows I'm going to put him on the spot anyway. We lost a lot of students going from the second to the third year. And I think this group would particularly, I'm not sure I remember the numbers, but I think that they were disproportionately from this group of students that were undeclared, or is that correct?
They're not overall
Yeah.
number of students in that group.
Yeah. Which to me says something, sort of, I look at sort of the macro trend, it says something. It's, when you engage, this confirms what we know. When you engage students in their learning and they're interested in what they're learning, the success rate is going to be higher. So the concept that we have for the new building is actually very much centered around this one of these as major challenges. And so bringing in career services, bringing in advising, and bringing in academic resources all together in what I hope is going to be a model that is going to be established, as a national model, that's our thinking. So in other words, bringing that, the career services really is about connecting them to options that are realistic and telling them those are good things to be, and just because you learned in high school that maybe you want to be in business or engineering, that may not align with your talents and your skills at this point. But these are the other options. And so that is very central to I don't have a solution for it other than telling you that we need to engage them in a different way and truly care about whether they succeed or not. But why do we do this? Often, and this goes to back an old model of which I grew up in, is no one really cared whether you succeeded or not. It was actually up to you to succeed, and you had to prove that you were worth, hanging on to. We've moved away from that, right? And so, yeah, but at the same time, we can't give them the wrong message. So it's that fine balance, it's managing that situation and hoping to really harvest actually from that talent pool and from that capability as much as we can, because it's in the benefit of our society actually to do that.
I don't need a mic, but I know they need it for the video.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I'm taking Okay, so we've talked about what we're going to do with students once they get here, student success. Are there plans to alter the way that we recruit, admit students, or orient them to the university in any way?
Not that I've been involved with in this year substantially, except for recruitment. We've been talking about international recruitment. That's a big aspect. I think our admissions and the transfer, we've got to sort of approach that transfer issue in a different way because the landscape has changed. But in terms of engaging students, our traditional sort of pools of students, I think we do a pretty good job recruiting them right now. Nothing has bubbled up to me as being, something that merits my attention in this year. We've been bringing in good classes. The quality of the students has been improving every year. The only challenges that we've had is in the transfers, and that's not for lack of our work, but it's the fact that as the economy gets stronger, fewer people go to the community colleges, and then there's a smaller pool from which we can draw. So I think we're doing a pretty good job actually on the recruitment side, but international is one, and then also I think the president has an initiative that he's thinking about, and he started up, of thinking about more out-of-state students. So he started some recruitment efforts in cities outside our state. You recall that a lot of what he has been doing has been in-state in the past, going from one county to the next. But he's gone to a few cities across the country. I can remember Chicago as one, but I can't remember any other one that he went to. But yes, so it's moving in that direction. But nothing actually that has come to my attention other than that. International is something that we need to look at. Actually, for for a university of our stature, and this really is the goal, and this the previous provost, Shelley Willinghans, had identified, is globalization and the impact that's going to have on the lives of our students in the future, and the importance of getting them ready for that is really something we have to address very aggressively. If you look at sort of how many of our students have international experiences, it's been pretty steady around, and again, I'm not good at remembering these numbers, but around 800 to 900 is what I remember, maybe a little over 900. And that's been pretty steady. And, I'm wondering, are the economic barriers just too high for a lot of students to take on the additional cost? And we're not going to be able to do much in that unless we increase our scholarship budgets. A different way of doing it is to bring the world here. And so, to have a very diversified international pool of students that are peppered into with our students, so the international students benefit from an education here, which we hope, which they would consider one of the best in the world, and then our students benefit from them being here as well. So I think that I think is of strong interest to me, and we're looking at various ways of doing that. Yes, sir.
In the spirit of speaking truth to power, I'd like to very respectfully ask a question to power, which is that I'm one of the faculty members who's very demoralized by reading about our university week after week in the newspaper. Whatever happens later this month is not going to resolve that. And you just spoke about the international purview of the university and reach, but we're in a process now where the chief academic officer of the university was limited to an internal search, and so far as I understand, there's only one candidate. How can you restore the morale of the faculty and assure us that you are an independent academic leader for our university?
All right, it's a great honest question, and I got the question earlier also from a group of faculty, but thank you for the question. Let me address the first part of your question first, which is sort of what's swirling around us, and I'll take it purely from sort of the academic standpoint. I know some of you, most of you may be on the academic side, but others are included here for this open forum. But I'm doing that because, if I was selected for this, I'd be the chief academic officer. So from the academic standpoint, I think this, again, the work we do is so important to society that we have to focus on the reasons we came here and why we do this, okay? And when we do that, perhaps at least for me, when I think about this, because, I've been through this as well, and it's been a roller coaster through the process. But when we do that, we should think about, well, there are factors that we don't control in our academic world that we've been working on. But we do control one thing. What is it that we choose to focus on? What is it that we choose to be energized about? What is it that we choose to be excited about? And again, that goes back to, why are we doing this? Why would I want to do this? Fundamentally, each one of us has to ask that question, and we do. Because it's really important, and it's worth it, and I can make a difference. And I'm going to choose on what I focus on. And there's plenty that I can focus on that others don't control. That's the way I choose to go through life. And so when I think about this, I think about, we have worked for years on this 2020 plan. We have a blueprint for the university. And then we had a mid sort of course boost, if you will, with the University of 21st Century, which most of you in this room spent 2 probably years of your life on. We finalized that. Let's focus on that, because that's what we're here for. So what I would do is I would reach out to the faculty and the staff in the academic units and challenge them to refocus their efforts. And I will tell you, as someone who has been here now almost 5 years, that one of the things that excited me when I came here in my first year was the energy, excitement that I found here. Now, admittedly, that was for my school, my academic unit, and to some extent the rest of the university, but usually unfortunately we're fairly isolated. But it was there. And that was what was one of the factors that drew me here, because the trajectory was enormous. Faculty in my home unit were excited, they were energized, they were looking for someone who could take them to the next level. Why do we choose not to do that? Because of things that are occurring on the periphery. That's what I would ask myself. Let's refocus, and that's what I would challenge the faculty to do, all right? The second part of your question is on the search, and I can just tell you, I can't comment on that. I'm a candidate, all right? How did I get to this point? I gave you my little story, but I didn't go through the details. I came here to be Dean of Engineering, all right? I was asked, and through all of my work through the University of Cincinnati, my appointments have been actually through just people asking me to serve in those positions. I've done it as service to the university. So when the president asked me to serve for this, he was making the best decision for the university, in my opinion, at that time, and he asked me to serve as interim, and I was enjoying leading the speed school, but I stepped forward because I think that's what I had to do. And regardless of whether this was an internal or external search, I would have applied for it because I believe in what I'm doing. I've enjoyed this position in this year. I've enjoyed it to the extent that I've focused on the academic side of it. And so I would have applied whether it's internal. I don't control whether it's internal or external, but I would have applied either way. And what I need is the faculty and staff support for my position. If it's not there, quite honestly, I won't be successful. And so I want to re-engage in the business that we are working on here, which is educating students, creating knowledge, doing service for the community through our intellectual capacity. So that's what I would do. And I would reach out to the faculty and ask them to re-engage. We control our destiny. Don't let others tell you what our destiny is. And that to me is sort of the environment we're in right now. And speaking candidly, social media has advantages and disadvantages, but everyone becomes an expert at everything. And we are taught in academia that that's not right. Things have to be vetted, they have to be discussed. So let's control our destiny internally and let's move on this trajectory. All right, it's up to us. So that's the answer, that's what I would have, the way I would approach it. But thank you for the question. I know it's bubbling in the background for everybody, and I've been thinking hard about it as well. So, yes, Kevin? Oh, I'm sorry, there was another hand I didn't.
So you talked a little bit about student engagement in the new building, and I know at Speed School you centralized the business, which I think is very successful. The other thing you did at Speed School was centralize career advising, which you didn't get to talk about, but I think that's been tremendous. Probably one of the reasons for the tremendous growth of the incoming freshman class from 300 to 500. Do you have any other kind of pet projects here that if you're selected for this position, that you kind of have in the back of your mind that can see that it would benefit the university.
Thanks. So those, I think part of the responsibility of leadership, and I'll say those didn't come out, they worked out well, and they were things that we discussed in detail and then concluded were important for us to do. I think my responsibility, if I were in this position, is to really think outside the box, think about possibilities, suggest ideas, but then bring them down to the grassroots for discussion, for vetting. And so in terms of pet projects, these have to evolve, all right? But I could have sort of exciting ideas that I think are exciting. And that's, while centralizing business office is not an exciting, terribly exciting project, it's that sort of thinking. In that case, I actually, quite honestly, that came out because I had been looking at the national trend. And you may recall this, and I had said to the faculty, I anticipate this is going to be a necessity in a few years. So it's anticipating what is likely to happen that is important. And I think as an institution, that's where we have to make a step forward. This institution and my previous institution, you have used the same approach, all right? That is, we're chasing. We're trying to catch sort of our benchmarks or aspirational schools is the correct term, the aspirational schools. It's going to be very hard. We've done this for years and decades at both schools, and while we make some progress, they're not standing still either, all right? So it's hard to catch. So the idea is that we have certain challenges right now with student success, things of that sort. Can we be known nationally for original thinking and new paradigms that will get us there, and then we'll change the game in the way we're evaluated. So there are so many pressures on us now in the way that were different from when I started my career. First of all, funding is gradually disappearing for public education, through states. Most universities are now becoming much more dependent on tuition, just like private universities, and their endowments. That's one of the pressures. So the reaction could be, well, we just year to year we try to figure out and we fine tune here, fine tune there. But is there a paradigm that is different in the way we educate? Because then technology is coming in, sort of costs are unsustainable. So you have to ask big questions as in this position. What is education going to look like in 30 or 40 years? Are students going to spend 4 years at a university? Are we going to teach them in the same way we're teaching them right now? Over your lifetime, think about how technology has impacted your life and how different it is now than it was 30 years ago, for those of you who are older than 30. But think about that. Assistant professors coming in right now are going to be sitting on these, and some of you may be in this group. 30 years from now, they have to prepare for that world. I'll be long gone by then. They'll have to prepare for that world. And so when I think of pet projects, I think of pet ideas that I can throw out. All right? And it's our responsibility collectively, actually, that's the responsibility of faculty at a university, is to think about those ideas that are transformational. And that's the one way that we can start to define the game and then have that national reputation for excellence. So I know I gave a very general answer, but I think so now coming back to more specifics, there are some sort of nuts and bolts things that we've already started that I would hope to continue, so you could call those my pet projects. But I'm very data driven. And I think that the way we manage and we empower folks to be creative and move forward is to provide a system that's transparent and predictable with respect to resource allocations, measuring of our performance, all of that. So what I'd like to do is develop a system that allows us to think about what our goals are in support of our university mission. All right, so some of those are well known, but they differ by field, so they have to be specific to the field. And then empower people to come up with good ideas that can be, that would be implemented to achieve those goals. And know that there is a predictable manner in which that connects to resources. So what that means is, this is sort of vague, but what that means is building out the structures by which we manage our resources, by which those are available, by which we measure performance, all of that. So it's really clear. Some of the anxiety and tension that we see is because people don't have that information. So they think they're being treated unfairly, right? And that may not be the case, but it's hard to be convinced unless you see the information. And it's all sort of been vetted and people have agreed that this is what we want to look at. So that's one thing that I think we need to do. And that would allow me, I think what we need to do is move decisions, move sort of the responsibility and the ability down to the units, and units should move down. Units, I mean the academic units, and units should move down to the department chairs, or the departments within their units. That's same, it should reflect down. So the ideas are generating here, and there's a clear way in which resources can be aligned to support those ideas. So this isn't the ideal. This is what I'd like to develop. But that's sort of the pet project right now. To some extent, we've already had it started up in the provost office. So it's sort of a work in progress. There was another question to me here. Yeah.
So I was just wondering. It seems that one of the trends in higher education is for governments to say, instead of seeing higher education as something that generally is a good that they need to invest in, governments may be saying, well, let's look at different departments, let's look at jobs, let's look at careers, so let's make more targeted investments into, for example, departments that are producing engineer scientists, for example.
Versus French literature majors, was it French literature and electrical engineering? Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So, right, my question being, right, so as someone data-driven like yourself, right, it would be pretty easy to say, right, the data is leading us in the direction that basically we need to beef up parts of the university and diminish certain parts of the university. I wanted to know what your overall philosophy was on that, and what are we doing? Are we piggybacking on that move toward looking at these one-to-one? Is this getting us jobs or not? Or are we resisting that and having some kind of efforts to resist that more generally?
It's a great question. So I think what you're asking is sort of what is my core philosophy on that approach. I really value research universities as they exist today. And I think they're very, very special and very important institutions to our society. Having been born outside this country and come here and taken advantage of our public education system here, and recognizing the challenges that we have as others start to emulate our system. To your first question about public good versus private good, I think it's foolish to think that if you educate fewer people, you're going to be more competitive. All right, so that's my take on that. When everybody else is trying to tap into more of their intellectual capacity and we're thinking about how we can educate fewer, there's something wrong with that. Secondly, our universities are, in this country, if you look at the top 200 universities in the rankings doesn't mean anything, but generally there is a pretty good correlation between what goes on a university and its ranking, within categories. You know that these are the top universities and they're first rate. So when we think about that, higher education in the U.S. is probably been the most successful aspect of our whole economy over a century. All right? We don't get the word out on that. We sit back and take sort of the criticisms, and what's amazing is they come from businesses, and I say, we're doing a lot better in higher education than you're doing in manufacturing right now, so why don't you focus on manufacturing and let us do what we're experts at, all right? So that's my view, and we've got to get that word out. Now, we've got to do it in a polite way. We've got to do it in an engaged way. I wouldn't say what I just said if I was outside, but you know what I'm talking about. I mean, our manufacturing sector has almost disappeared, yet they're giving us advice on, and have like half the top 100 universities in the world, okay? So what we're doing pretty well. And really, universities have been a big part of the engine for progress in this country. Now, progress can be measured in different ways, but I think what you're getting to is my only way of measuring is how our economy is doing with respect to manufacturing, all of those things that run by technology. Of course it's not. All right, society is so much more complex than that. And then I go back to why institutions are important. It's more than just, and by the way, this is not workforce development, this is education. I don't do any chemical engineering right now, I can tell you that. Since I came here, I haven't done very much chemical engineering. But that's my undergraduate education and my graduate education. It's not what I know and how to make petroleum that is going to influence here, but it's the way I learned how to think, to communicate, and all of that. That's important. We're also repositories, and we are we're safeguarding society's values at universities. And therefore, while there may be a program that may not be important right now, it is important to study all fields of knowledge. And universities have to safeguard that capability. So if you were a sort of a leader in the 1960s, am I getting this about right? But would you have ever thought of, maybe Afghanistan as being an important part of study of history and culture? Probably not. But when that all happened in Afghanistan, guess where they had to go for all the expertise? There's a reason these programs exist. There's a reason we have to be knowledgeable. Why are we exploring deep space? We don't exactly know what the advantage is, but it's important to do that. So, I really have that. That's my approach. I don't know if I can answer more than that, but it's not electrical engineers versus, and we do have to meet the demands. So what I mean by that, if there are students who want to be in those fields, then we have to teach. And it's the responsibility of us as faculty. This is one important point that I do want to make. We have to get out there also and tell people why our field is important. We can't just sit back and wait for applications to come in. That is extremely important. So our job has changed as faculty as well.
We may have time for one more question. If not, let me thank Dr. Pinto for stepping up to become a candidate. It is a important position, and thank you for coming, and please fill out the evaluation form before you leave. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.